So really what I want to talk about is for you to think about why you want to garden, how you want to garden, what it is you want to get out of gardening, rather than what people like Monty Don or Charles Dowding, or, you know, the kind of big sort of gardening experts who can be a bit intimidating. I was watching a bit of Monty Don last night, you know, and I find it a bit sickening when he sort of goes into his jewel garden, and then he was in his writer's garden, and then it's all so perfect, you know. I think, oh, for goodness sake, you know. But, you know, because we don't have that kind of time and money. And Charles said he spends 80 hours, was it 80 hours a week in his garden? You know, I mean, you've got to do it. You've got to be realistic about it. So when I was studying at Henry Doubleday's, we were actually doing no-dig gardening, but it was pre-Charles Dowding, and we were following Ruth Stout, who was one of the people who did it. And actually Charles Dowding was following somewhere. I've got a very, very old book here by F.C. King, who also wrote books. This one's called Gardening with Compost, but it's way back in the 30s, and he was doing no-dig and gardening with weeds and all sorts of things. On a big estate in Westmoreland, which is now Cumbria, I think. And Esther Dean was in Australia. So, you know, it's a very good philosophy to follow, I think. But as I was saying, you know, I think you should set yourself realistic goals and don't beat yourself up about it. Make a list about of what you want to get from your garden. You know, is it a space for you to just play and relax? You know, it's for you and your family to enjoy them. If you've got kids that want to kick balls around, you know, don't plant roses everywhere. My dad was a great rose grower, and the garden, Jeannie will remember, my cousin is here, used to kick footballs around, and they would just puncture straight away on my dad's rose bushes. So that wasn't much good for me. So, and it can be, obviously it can be a haven for wildlife. It's not a competition. It should be therapeutic and restful, you know. And I love that quote from Philip Kerr: "You're wasting your time if you don't have time to waste." And then, you know, I saw that somebody was putting in one of the, I think it was a Facebook allotments group or something. Someone had said, "Oh, gardening is such a chore, isn't it? It's such a so much work. Why did we do it?" You know, and I thought, well, if you've got that attitude, well, don't do it. You know, you shouldn't do it. Just find something else to do. Find something you enjoy. It's got to be enjoyable, otherwise it's pointless. And I love that quote. And I found the whole one, you know, what is this life if full of care we have no time to stand and stare? So, I mean, one of the great pleasures I find in the garden and the allotment is stopping and, you know, sitting down on, I've got benches on my allotment and garden, so I can sit down and, you know, look at the pond and look at the flowers in the allotment, and look at the buzzards going overhead and the ravens and everything that's going on. You've got to be able to enjoy it. A bit like, and then I found that Punch cartoon cover, which I thought was so good, you know. It's the right attitude. That's what I do. Take the gardening magazine up and read that. So I just thought, before I got into the next bit, I just thought it was quite good to remind yourself, you know, that garden, well, you know, as that previous bit of things, you know, nature gets on very well without our help. In fact, better really. And how does it do it? And just to remind yourself of this incredible process of photosynthesis, which I find quite astonishing, you know, that plants can take oxygen and sunlight and create carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, which is basically starches and sugars, which they exchange in the soil with fungi, and to grow. So all you need is water and sunlight, really. That's the main thing you need, and a healthy soil. And the less you disturb your soil, the more healthy it will be, generally speaking. You know, and nature has a great way of balancing up soils, and that's partly what F.C. King noticed at Levens Hall, is that the weeds actually help to balance what's going on in the soil. So we have this incredible soil food web in healthy soils. So, and through not digging, you do actually encourage that a lot. And so you've got all the, not only the fungi and the symbiotic relationships, but all the bacteria, all the little creatures that are in there, You know, you've got billions of creatures in just a gram of soil, actually. So it's quite astonishing the life that there is in soil. And there's I mean, you can find loads of these things, but so this is about how bacteria, you know, when protect plants against viruses and diseases quite a lot. So they will actually wrap around the microscopic root hairs and in a healthy soil. And there's been a lot of research showing how the addition of compost to soils keeps plants healthy. So once you get your soil in good balance, you know, you don't need to you shouldn't be using any pesticides, herbicides, or anything like that. Well, there's just more pictures of that. Incredible to see. Anyone who saw one of my previous talks, you'll know that I've got a lot of pictures of the soil life. So that's kind of it summed up in a little cartoon. You know, the plants feed the fungus, basically the mycorrhizal fungi, and the fungi feeds the plants with the minerals. So the fungi can kind of basically eat rock and get minerals out of rock and break them down into a form for the plants, and then the plants can give the fungi the sort of foods that they need, these complex carbohydrates. So soil health is the most important thing, having a good, what we call friable soil, one that crumbles up nicely like that. So you've got lots of little particles, each one of which is covered in a very thin film of water. And in that thin film of water is where most of the life is. You know, that's the kind of soil that you want. Well, that's actually compost there, but same kind of idea. It looks very like a kind of molehill soil, doesn't it? And this is really important. So a lot of people think that they garden for the season. So a lot of people, like today, I've just come in from the allotment. The allotment's full of people today. They haven't been there. I've been up there a lot because it's just around the back of my house. So I'm very lucky. But the amount of times I go up there and I'm the only person on the allotments, of course, as soon as the sun comes out in the spring, there's loads of people there. But you really need to keep going all the year round. And most people will leave their allotment at the end of the season and just kind of abandon it and then start again in the spring. Whereas you need to really keep the soil covered, either to keep things growing like that. So we've got leeks, we've got land cress there. We had that lovely asparagus kale in the previous picture. That's my favorite kale. And there it is again, asparagus kale. These were all taken in January when I first started writing this. And then it's really well mulched with a load of old thatching straw that I've got there. That just protects the soil surface. And also by growing lots of perennial plants. So this is a globe artichoke. Things that are growing all through the year. Again, back in January, this was, you will be protecting the soil and the soil structure. And I took a decision when I first moved here back in 1990 that I wanted to have plants which would be of interest all the year round. And so I thought, well, if I concentrate on the winter, things that will flower in the winter, particularly, or be of interest in the winter, like the teasels on the left there for the goldfinches to go for, then the rest of the year is pretty easy. So on the right there, we've got the witch hazel, and I think the next slide's got, that just shows you, you know, it's growing, it's flowering just after Christmas generally. We'll go right through with snow on it. It's got the most beautiful scent. It's right by our back door, so we can stand by the back door and look through. We've got a glass back door. You can look through at the birds feeding on the bird feeders and see the hamamelis in full flower, and also the mahonia that I've got there. Again, that's in January. And I heard on a program recently that birds like blackcaps can get nectar from mahonia in the depths of winter, very high energy nectar that they'll be feeding on. So that's interesting. And I've had bumblebees right through the winter on that, you know, when the weather's good enough for them to come out. And this one, probably my absolute favorite, is this perennial wallflower, flowering that back again in January, flowering now. It just never stops flowering. It never stops, and and the bees absolutely love it. So if you're going to get any plant, any one plant, go for that perennial wallflower. And you can see it's growing out of an old sink there. I've now propagated it. The only problem with it is because it never stops flowering, it's very difficult to know when to prune it and cut it back. So recently I've just sort of decided to just hack it right back. In fact, I had hacked it right back not long before that picture was taken, but it just comes back into flower again. And I've got several plants, and all the bits I've hacked off, I've stuck into trays with quite a lot of grit and compost, and I'm propagating. So I'm going to have loads of those. And probably the most important advice is don't dig. Just keep reiterating that, because it is very important. And this is what Charles was on about in his talk. You can see Charles's talk, can't you, on the Proper Job YouTube channel. You can see all the past talks and things there. So Charles's talk will be there. So this is going back to the list. So make a list of what you want from your garden. Oh, I've got part of my screen is can other people see what I've written? Because I can't see all things I've written.
Yes.
So make a list of what you want from your garden and what you've got time to do. You know, it's no point growing beetroot if you don't like beetroot. You know, think about what you like to eat, and what you got space for. So this is fairly basic stuff, but it's surprising how many people don't really do it, and they might buy a packet of seed and sow the whole lot, and you know, you can get thousands and thousands of seeds in a packet. And are you going to eat all that stuff that you've grown? Are you going to eat, you know, 2 beds full of chard or whatever it is, you know? So think about that. Those are my pink poppies I was talking about at the beginning. I mean, and I mostly, a lot of the stuff, my wife gets a little bit cross with me sometimes because I grow more flowers than veg. That's one of my absolute favorites, the Viper's bugloss, and being visited there by the hummingbird hawk moth. And I was incredibly lucky to get that shot because they whiz in and out, and I'd seen it on there the day before, went back with my camera and just happened to time it right. I basically just had time to point and click, and it was off again. They whiz around like mad, and I just got that very lucky shot. So with try not mowing. If you've got lots of grass, well, think about having a meadow. You know, stop mowing it all. Mow the edges and mow a path through the middle so you can enjoy it, but leave a lot of it and then just cut it all at the end of the season with a scythe or a rough cut mower. You know, wildlife gardens need lots of flowering plants all the year round, and also larval food plants for the caterpillars and everything. And you need to have habitats for solitary bees. So some of them like actually a bit of bare earth. Quite a lot of them need, or very, very short grass so they can go in. So that's kind of, you know, if you've got your meadows, you know, you can also mow one bit of it to have a very short grass area, and even sculpt it back to the soil. So you want to create a variety of different habitats. Ponds probably the single most important feature to have. And in fact, my daughter was doing a webinar on ponds this week because she works for Earthwatch, and they had a phone-in Q&A all about ponds. So if anyone's interested in that, get in touch and I can send the link to that. Green roofs I'll talk about in a minute. And then just, you know, habitats for reptiles and amphibians, basically leaving little piles of wood, piles of rock. You know, wildlife gardens are deliberately not tidied up too much, and you deliberately leave things like the picture of the teasel that I hadn't chopped down at the end of the season, because that's going to be a seed for the goldfinches and things, but also for overwintering insects in the hollow stems. And then just time to sit and look. So I was walking past our pond. This is actually right on the edge of our pond, although it's on a strawberry, it was grown there. And I saw these flies, you know, when you see flies sort of dancing up and down on like a little column of flies dancing up and down. And I just stopped for a minute and I thought, what are they doing, these flies? Why do they dance up and down like that? And it took me ages before they settled. And when they settled, I thought, oh my God, they're not flies, they're little tiny moths. So that's a longhorn moth, I found out. Look at the length of its antennae. I couldn't even fit it all in the frame. Incredible. They're tiny, weeny little moths. They look like little flies when they're dancing around. And they're the males that were after the females. So they're sort of displaying around to say, look at me, how good I am. And I'd never have known that they were there if I hadn't stopped to take a minute. And there on the right says, can you see that? That's a brimstone butterfly on a hazel. I couldn't believe that I spotted that. It's so well camouflaged. That's actually going down onto Padley Common. And then on the left, that little tiny white bubble, that is the egg of the brown hairstreak butterfly on a sloe or blackthorn. So tiny, tiny little eggs. And most people, when these tractors are going around flailing our hedges, I'm sort of suffering because I know that they're destroying all these very rare butterflies in the 2-year-old blackthorn. There's some lovely caterpillars on nettles, and then the orange tip butterfly on hedge garlic or cuckoo flower. So that's another thing, these orange tips. So the hedge garlic, which you probably know, grows quite wild and normally at the bottom of a hedge. Not the most attractive looking plant, has a little white flower. If you look closely, you might see near the top a tiny little orange spot, because they're orange tip butterflies, but they lay bright orange eggs as well. I couldn't find the picture I had of an egg, but I did find that's quite a newly emerged caterpillar. And I had one of those hedge garlic plants growing right next to my greenhouse, quite an ugly thing. And I was tempted to yank it out and then realized it had this tiny little caterpillar eating it away. So, do look at your weeds and things that you might get rid of and treat them in a bit more respect. The nettles in the garden, they're probably, unless they're in a good sunny spot, full sun, you're not going to get caterpillars on them. You're only going to get caterpillars on nettles if you've got a lot of nettles and in the best sunniest spot. So most people think, I'll save a few nettles and I'll save them under a hedge or something. If you want it for the butterflies, that's almost pointless. These ones were in our field, which is just out the window here. We've got a massive clump of nettles right in the middle of the field. And we get peacocks and tortoiseshells particularly, but red admirals and what's the other one? I can't think what the other one is that feeds on the nettles now, but quite a few of the butterflies feed on the nettles. There's the orange tip butterfly, and there are the eggs. These I took off the internet though, but those are the little tiny orange eggs, the hatching caterpillar. And that's another probably weed that you'd probably want to rip out, cleavers or goosegrass, and that's got the bloody nose beetle larvae on it. And I noticed those on the allotments again, loads of these bloody nose beetle larvae. I didn't know what they were, but luckily my next door neighbor is Nick Baker, the naturalist, so I always go around to him. And in fact, they were next to his compost bin. And then this is the mullein moth eating the mulleins which come up. And they completely destroy the mulleins, pretty much, eat them to pieces. But I don't mind, because I'm growing the plant for the moth, not for the flower a lot of the time. And enough of the flowers come through anyway. And a lot of people get rid of those anyway, because they do come up as kind of weeds on the allotment, this I planted around my seating area on the allotment. This is the stachys and the wool carder bead. So the bottom left and the top right pictures, those are the wool carder bees, and they will come if you plant this plant. They will come, and they're fascinating to watch when you're having a cup of coffee, sitting there. Very entertaining. The males will bomb any hoverfly that comes in. They attack, and any bumblebee that comes in, they'll attack them. They'll just fly, and they just biff them out of the way. They just say, get off. This is I'm saving this for my females, you know. So the females are on the stackies, and they take the wool off, and they stuff it in their nests to make nice cozy nest for their larvae, and they get the pollen off it as well. So they're great. Oil beetles we have around. I love the oil beetles. I think then, have I got the picture? Oh no, I spent ages trying to find the picture of the larvae of this, but I don't know if people have seen this. These are huge beetles. They're totally harmless. You can pick them up. They won't hurt you or anything. And there are a few different species, but their larvae are tiny weeny little things called triangulans. And they live, and right now, if you go around your celandines, if you've got celandines in your garden, particularly, or other yellow, or dandelions, especially the early yellow flowering plant, if you just put your hand under the flower, the warmth from your fingers often brings out these triangulans. They're tiny weeny little black larvae of these beetles, and what they do is they hook themselves onto any bees that are foraging on the plants, and the bees carry them off on their legs, and then these little larvae feed off the food that the bees bring. They're quite extraordinary. And I was lucky enough, I spent ages doing that around celandines. And then one time I hit lucky and I got a load of these triangulars. They all come out with the movement or the warmth of your hand. So I'm spending more and more time looking at insects rather than gardening, really. I made an insect hotel with bamboo, and I had these, you've got to site them in full sun, and you've got to sand off your bamboos so they're not splintery. Otherwise you rip the poor little bees' wings off when they go in the holes. But these are different sized bamboos, and you can buy these hotels. It's just so entertaining. It's wonderful to see, and they get little bits of mud, and they get pollen, and they fill up the tubes with their larvae. You can even buy them with glass, with inspection panels with glass tubes now, like sort of, you know, like you get in the chemistry lab, or plastic tubes. And they're easy to make. I did it at the Toby Buckland Festival we were at, and we built them insect hotels with bamboos and bricks with holes in and bits of slate, because you can, you know, get other insects overwintering. And that was fun. And that's Toby Buckland. He really liked it. So to do that. I was going to do it last year, of course it was all cancelled. And that's my green roof. That's my shed roof. So I thought, I've got a shed. I could have men need lots of sheds. So I need a bigger shed, and I'm going to get it made really strong. So I had it made sort of extra strong and lined it. And then, because it's going to carry a lot of weight of soil, obviously. So I put very poor soil on the roof. You don't want good soil for wildflowers. You want the worst soil, actually. And you can see what I've got there. I've got loads of campion and daisies and Viper's bugloss. And I put lots of yellow rattle in as well, because that parasitizes the grasses. I've got self-heal up there. I've got loads of stuff in there, plantains. I've even got irises growing up there. I'm really happy up there. I was inspired to do that because my wife's Norwegian, and seeing look at that one on the right, it's got trees growing off it. Everywhere in Norway, they've got green roofs, even on the notice boards, as you can see, a little green roof on the notice board. It's brilliant. I love it. I saw telephone boxes with green roofs on. And then sometimes you see cattle and goats grazing on them. Incredible. So this is the kind of permaculture-y bit. You know, when you're getting excited about plants, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, you just do need to think about this a little bit. It's really important stuff. It's not rocket science, but, you know, plants grow. The reason there's such a variety of different plants is because, you know, things are adapted, or they're tolerant, or they might be more shade tolerant or more tolerant of wind or whatever it is. So look at probably the best thing to do is, if you've just moved, or if you're thinking of putting stuff in your garden, go and walk up and down the road or look at your neighbors and see what's growing well, see what you like that's growing well around you. And is it in the sun? Oh, we've got someone, Camille, coming in again. Is it in the sun? Is it in the shade? Is it on the slope? You know, think about these things, and what you want from it, you know. And you know, basic stuff like how long is the season in your area. So that's a very sort of permaculture checklist that you would go through first. You know, people always seem to want to grow things that, particularly on that pH, like people, I forget which way around is it, the pink and the blue hydrangeas. You know, people always want to grow the other color than they can, because one of them grows on a high pH and it goes pink, I think, and if it's low pH it goes blue. So they want pink ones even though they live in a, you know, in a blue area, that kind of thing. And it's just, you can't fight nature like that. I wanted to grow hazels, hazel trees that you can get them impregnated with truffles, and I thought that would be fantastic, hazels and truffles, but they only grow in high alkaline soils, and I'm on Dartmoor and it's acid, so it's pointless me trying to grow truffles, much as I'd love to. So like I say, don't try and fight the conditions. In fact, yesterday I went to a garden in Chagford here, and there's water everywhere in the garden. There's a spring coming up higher up the hill, and it's made quite a mess actually of the garden. And I said, well, why don't you make a pond and then, you know, create a marsh garden below it, and that will suck up a lot of this, and you can make it absolutely beautiful with a marshy and boggy garden, and it'd be full of wildlife. It'd be really, really good. So then I realized I hadn't put ponds in my talk. So this is my pond, part of it, and it's full of newts, and yeah, that's my back garden, bit of my back garden with the pond. So you see you've got a bench, you can just sit there, look at the dragonflies, look at the long-horned moths, whatever it is. I love, it's great. You so much going on. And my children, both my daughters, people, when they were little, people were saying, well, aren't you frightened that you're going to drown your children in the pond? But I never was, because they were very careful and respectful. And of course, and now my eldest daughter's a pond expert. So, you know, obviously pretty good. And you get wonderful treats like these dragonflies coming out, you know, three or 4 years in the pond, and then they come out looking like that. Yeah, the other reason they didn't go in the pond was because they got bitten by the larvae of these, and they really bite, the dragonfly larvae. They can do, latch onto your finger or toe. So you can obviously change the conditions a bit. So we face, you can't see here, but I'm facing Dartmoor here, and the wind hits the front of our house absolutely full on. And I've put, in the front garden, I've put bushes of Eleagnus, which is very, very good. The Mahonias out there. Various plants of Berberis as well. Plants that are good at cutting the wind, breaking up the wind a bit. And also with lots of fruit or flowers, which are good wildlife value. Hollies is another really good one, of course. And again, just emphasizing that, you know, all plants will benefit from the soils not being disturbed. So putting lots of mulch on and growing as many perennials and disturbing the soil as little as possible does actually mean that you'll build a healthier soil, and then you can find that you can grow a wider range of things anyway, because it mitigates against pH and other things. And then I thought, just on the last bit really now, I just thought, you know, some people don't have the sort of garden, no space that I'm very lucky to have. But there's so many other things you can do. You know, you can look at vertical gardens like here. That's an inside one. They're becoming quite trendy, you know, in sort of office blocks and things, but also on the side of buildings, there's lots of vertical plantings going on like that. I saw a fantastic bus station in the south of France when I was there, which had these incredible, almost vertical plantings there, with little kind of modules. They were going up a slight angle. That was great. So I thought I'll just talk about a few of these ones. When I was studying at Henry Doubleday's back in the 1980s, I bought a book on miniature gardens. I got a bit obsessed with miniature gardens, and I went and I realized the woman who'd written the book lived had lived in a village not far from where I was. So I went to this village to see if I could find her, and she was still alive, and I didn't know where she was. I wandered around the village until I saw some miniature gardens growing. Unfortunately, I haven't got any pictures of that, but she had all these little miniature gardens. And at the end, in the links, I found a little bit of film made of her. It's only a minute and a half. It was on Pathé News of her making these miniature gardens. She made one for the Queen with a miniature rose garden, because you can get miniaturized roses. They're not bonsai, they're naturally miniature conifers, and they're really lovely to grow. I've still got some in the garden which are now 40 years old. I've got some conifers, and they're still very small. And because I was moving around a lot, you can take the whole garden with you in a pot, Great. That's the Juniperus communis cupresso, which is a beautiful tool. It's really effective. You see, and you can grow in sinks or troughs like that. Lots of miniature plants from New Zealand. It's very good for them. Lots of alpine plants you can grow, miniature shrubs, miniature flowers, tiny little flowers. I think they're really lovely. So if you don't have much garden, they're a great thing to do, And of course, the Japanese are past masters of it. If you look it up on the internet, in Pinterest or just online, you'll find loads of ideas. Some of them are pretty ghastly, but these are really sweet. And my dad was really keen on, he had a thing, he called it a carboy, which is a huge, great round, I think it was for acid originally, and he had a miniature kind of jungle that he grew. And I wish I still had that huge, great glass bottle. I don't know what happened to it, but he made tools to go down into it. And there are ones which once you set them up, you can actually kind of put the cork in. You can actually close them off, and they'll have their whole kind of ecosystem going within them. But there are different variations on that, and things for growing orchids in. So you can control they're really good for sort of humid, jungle-y type plants, ferns and for shady areas. So yeah, that's another thing that you can do. And as you can see in the picture there, you can do it on different scales. And of course, raised beds is probably, people are familiar with that. That's just a very good way of containing what you're doing. And I've realized that for a lot of people, it's really good if you can just focus your attention on quite small areas at a time. And I've been doing quite a lot of work with schools, and they're very keen. I think it's the next slide is the square foot gardening. This is a brilliant thing to do for yourself. It's great to do with children. You can do it with schools like it because they can do it with like a whole class. So different children can take over a square foot, and you can look these up. There are loads of websites. So you can either look up square meter or square foot gardening, and there are lots of guides that tell you what you can put in a square foot. So obviously you can put one tomato, or 16 garlic in a square foot, 9 spinach, that kind of thing. So it really helps you to sort of focus. And I've decided I'm going to do more square meter probably on my allotment, but I'm going to kind of follow this a bit more this year and put things more into kind of blocks, probably of a square meter. And that way also you start to go towards what we call polyculture, which is where you mix things up more. So you can see in there, you're mixing up flowers, fruiting vegetables, root vegetables, leaf vegetables. So they're mixed up. So you're getting a lot more kind of polyculture going on, which is really good because it confuses the pests as well. You don't just get a big stand of carrots and get loads of carrot fly coming in, or that kind of thing. So you can kind of confuse it, but you will also be inviting in the predators which are going to eat any pests on your what's going on. And of course, if you've got more space, you can do what's called forest gardening. And there's lots and lots of ideas. There's Martin Crawford, I think I put him in the link, down at Dartington. He's got the most wonderful forest garden, and you can grow edible nuts, edible fruit trees, obviously shrubs, you know, like black currants and gooseberries and things. So everything in the forest garden can be edible, but also beautiful. So even things like the hostas there, when the hostas are first coming out the ground, you can cook them and eat them like asparagus, you know, steam them, very tasty. Flowers, lots of flowers that are edible, or herbs. Some of them are there. Every plant in that kind of synergistic forest garden is going to be food, fiber, attracting for ground cover or whatever it is, you know. And it's astonishing the amount of edible landscaping, is another word for it, that you can do. And once it's set up, the maintenance is mainly chopping it. So you do what's called chop and drop. In fact, there was another talk I was thinking of doing was composting is the last thing you should do, because actually, if you just cut vegetation and just leave it around the plants in situ, that's what nature does. Nature doesn't make compost heaps, it drops leaves, and you know, that keeps the soil healthy. But you might want, you know, obviously you've got to keep up the fertility of soil. If you are removing sort of annual veg, particularly, and perennial veg, you do need to top up your fertility. So the Henry Doubleday method, Henry Doubleday studied this Bocking 14 comfrey. This is Russian comfrey, which is a clone, and you shove it in a barrel, no water. Monty Don and Bob Flaherty will tell you to put water in it. Don't put water in it, ram it down and catch the liquid that comes out the hole at the bottom. And then you can water that down and feed your tomatoes and other plants with it. Mulching, I've said, but don't forget it's sunshine and water that are doing the main thing. Photosynthesis and water as the main factors that you need for growing. I put this in because I wrote an article for Resurgence on peat and peat use and peat in composts, and realized that this and Charles talks about this quite a lot, you know, module sowing. Gardeners have kind of gone over largely to growing in modules and seed trays. It's quite a recent thing. If you pick up any of the old gardening books, I've got loads of, they talk about preparing seed beds in the garden a lot of the time. And a lot of things would be sown direct and then transplanted, or just sown in situ. I mean, you can't sow everything in modules anyway. So you have to sow a lot of things straight in situ generally, like carrots, for instance, parsnips, although some people do even try them. And it saves you a lot of buying all that peat in for a start. And I think it's something that we've got out of the habit as gardeners of doing is more direct sowing. There are pros and cons, obviously, to all these things, and you can control things a lot more with modules. But I've discovered that my greenhouse is completely full of seed trays now, and it's only February. So what am I going to do next? I've got to, I don't know. I need another greenhouse already. There you go. There's the modules. And of course, they're plastic generally. And you've got to get the compost. So, you know, either make it or you buy in. Even I buy in some composts, particularly for seeds, because it's very difficult to get the right compost for growing seeds without weed seeds or ones that you don't want coming up in it. Oh, what's happened there? Oh no, this is probably my favorite thing to do though, is taking cuttings. So I said I'd taken a load of cuttings of my perennial wallflowers. So you can see there that the mix has got a lot of grit in it. So you need a gritty mix, and then so many plants. That's rosemary there being propagated. Those are kind of soft, what they call softwood cuttings. So that's into the fresh stuff, and you just peel off some leaves at the bottom, cut it with a good pair of secateurs or a sharp knife. Usually cut it on a node and poke it in, keep it moist, and you'd be surprised how many more plants you can get like that. Most of them will take, if you do it right, they'll all take really well. Some people use hormone. I've never actually used it. Oh, someone's joining us. We're just about to finish. Hello, Ruth. Bit late, but we're getting through. And don't forget, any building that you put up will capture water off it. Water storage is really, really important. You need that water. Water and sunshine, don't forget, it's very important. But probably the thing that people don't realize is the best place to store water is in your soil. People don't think about that. If you've got a healthy soil and you're not digging it, then it will hold moisture really well. So the addition of compost and having the right plants will hold that moisture in the soil. So those are my some of the links. Well, these will go out because it is being recorded. But you'll see there's Martin Crawford there, the agroforestry .co.uk, fantastic resource. Anne Ashbury was the woman whose garden I went to see, and that's the little bit of film about her, Pathé News video. But you can find, if you just put her name in and search, I'm sure you'll find out these things easy enough. And of course, Charles, who was our speaker last month, he's got a great website and great YouTube channel worth looking at. And also look for Ruth Stout, Esther Deans and FC King. I just think they're very, very inspiring. And what Charles didn't say about FC King is that he's a great proponent of looking after his weeds as well, which I really liked. Okay, that's it. So how do I stop doing that? There we go. Stop sharing.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant.
I don't know what the time is. Oh yeah.
3:20.
All right. Okay. So I didn't get anyone interrupting me. That was. I thought you'd all gone to sleep. Hope it was all right. Anyone got any questions or anything you want to talk about or clarifications? Pond, James, I can see John. Can we talk about your daughter's pond talk link? I could see if I can, let me just go right away on my, I'll see if I can find her. Hang on, because she only wrote to me. I'll just put her into my, I'm on my emails now, so I'm just doing Kez. She's called Kez. Ponds webinar, here we are. I've got the recording, here we are. I'll put it in the chat box now. Okay. There you are. So yeah, it was quite good. I haven't watched it all yet, but it was very good. It's very good. Pond chatter. There are pond sites on Facebook as well. This is sort of if you want to find out. There's some very good, useful. If people use Facebook, things like wildlife gardens. There's a ponds one. There's a keep calm and make compost one, which actually winds me up quite a lot. I don't keep that calm. People keep asking the same questions over and over and over, but I guess that's the nature of it. But if you're a beginner, yeah. So
can I ask a question?
Of course.
What's the most commonly asked question about compost?
Hang on, Camille's asking something.
Hi. Yeah, I heard you talk in the shift course, which I did a few months ago, and it was really inspiring. And I was talking to another friend. We each have a plot in different allotments in Bristol, and it was hard to find some compost from green waste. Well, to buy actually. There's not a lot locally. especially if you want smaller quantities and not like 15 tons.
Yeah.
And we've been thinking for a long time about growing and maybe a career change. But anyway, before doing a career change, we were thinking about community compost, and I know that's something you've done. Talking to someone else, we were told that it was very difficult to start a community project, a composting project, because there's a lot of regulations and a lot of things, and it's not like something you can start really easily. But I was just wondering if that was something still encouraging to do, or if it was still doable.
Definitely. We've actually just revitalized the compost advisory group, because the community composting network sadly folded up a few years ago, and it was taken in hands by what used to be called the Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens, which is now Social Farm and Garden, based in Bristol. And I wrote to the previous chief exec in Eggington Metters and said, what's happening? You know, I'm getting a lot of people asking me about how starting up community composting right now, partly because of the lockdown, I guess, and all sorts of things, though, all sorts of reasons. And there are regulations, there is a bit of bureaucracy and red tape. It's not that difficult. It depends. I mean, I never get fazed by stuff like that. You know, a lot of groups I know that have started and just done things completely blissfully ignorant of any legalities or anything like that, and they've just done it. And then you know, but it does depend. You need to write to me separately. I'll put my email in, because you know, this is a longer conversation, and I'll put it in. Right. And anyone can write to me if there's anything you think of you want to ask, but that would be, you know, there's a lot to consider, and every site, every project, everything is unique.
I don't have that email.
Bespoke.
Thanks a lot, Nicky.
Yeah, but we spent decades arguing with ministers at DEFRA and Environment Agency, so we have actually hopefully ironed out a lot of the concerns and problems. So it's been a big part of my life getting that going. Yeah. And yeah, well, I suppose the common, I did a because my book, which I haven't got, I should be waving my book up. My book has just been relaunched. My composting book. It does actually have a little bit on community stuff in it, but the relaunch of the book is also available if you want to see the question and answers on that. Someone's making a horrible noise. Where's that coming from?
To go.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Vivian.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Right.
Good luck. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Can everybody? I don't know. Oh, that's stopped now. I was getting a lot of noise here. But anyway, that is on the composting front. That you can see there's a whole Q&A and little talk that I did there. And if you go on the Green Books website, so it's greenbooks.co.uk. I did a kind of quiz, and then we had a bit of a Q&A on that, and hopefully I explained that. In fact, even my sister Jeannie, she actually was quite nice about it, which, if you know my sister, that's quite an achievement. She watched it, can believe it. Anyway. Anyone else got any burning questions? Not that I approve of burning things, obviously.
Nicky, can you hear me?
Yeah.
If I ask a question. Okay, my internet cut out a couple of times then while you were discussing with Camille, so I missed a little bit of that. But I know that we're about to move to a village that's quite interested in community composting. And I don't know if you said anything about, is there a go-to resource for starting to think about getting a community composting operation up and together.
Yeah. Yes, I should have said that. Good point. I'm probably the only person in the country that's got all the resources, literally, because the Social Farms and Gardens they have taken on the archive, and they have got some stuff on their website. But my websites and my resources here, I've got, well, you can't see, but I have got manuals here, and I've got all kinds of things that I've produced over the years. So my office is a complete tip, as you can imagine, probably. But I've got I've got loads of resources, and they are available. In fact, if I put in my my website here, when I was at working for Devon County, they helped me. What is my website? I can't remember what it is now. .co, is it? I can't remember if it's .org or .co. You might have to try both of them. It's either .co.uk or .org. Because when I go on it, it just comes up automatically. So it stands for Devon Community Composting Network. And the Devon County Council have kind of given it to me, but I now have to pay for it. So I do keep it going. I don't really do a lot on it anymore, but it has got quite a lot of resources on it. And I've also got a Dr. Compost one, but that's probably the better one for that. And there's quite a bit on the Proper Job website, isn't there? There are some bits of film which and stuff. So if you look on the Proper Job website, you'll see quite a lot. So that's, well, everyone should have that, shouldn't they? I'll put it in anyway. proper-job.org. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot there, and when you're talking about things like these projects, it's all a matter of scale. You know, it depends whether you're talking about. I mean, I did one which was a project with 6 households working together, and right up to things when we had our little Zoom meeting with the Social Farms and Gardens. They were people that had been contracted to do. Well, we had one group that was contracted to do the whole of East Devon. And then in Sheffield, there were 2 groups that were doing compost collections from the whole of Sheffield. I mean, there's big projects, and some big projects in Hackney as well, in London. But it just depends, you know, small rural project or whatever, inner city projects, food waste projects. I've got an amazing resource here. This one. This is I sent a copy to Shift, Camille. This is Louisa Hamidi, and this is a whole book. It's a snapshot of the food waste in 2017. I've written a couple of pages of this, but it's all about food waste projects. Anything from setting up a kind of cafe from food that's come from, you know, past its sell-by or whatever it is, you know, date, from supermarkets to, you know, things like pret-a-manger or whatever it is, free guns, you know, skip diving for food and setting up cafes, abundance projects. There's a fantastic project that started in Sheffield called Sheffield Abundance, and Anne-Marie Culhane, who started that, has moved down to Devon now. And that was when she noticed how much fruit there was in Sheffield, you know, that was kind of dripping onto people's pavement when it was, you know, the abundance of apples and plums or whatever it was. And she started going up to people, knocking on people's doors and saying, you know, do you mind if I pick some of your apples, you know, do something with them? And she started this whole project up, which has become a really big thing, and it's spread to other parts of the country as well. And she's been planting edible fruit and nut trees down the Exeter Canal path from Exeter right out towards Exmouth. There's a footpath, and there are cherry trees and nut trees and all kinds of fruit trees growing down there. And her whole thing is to, you know, to sort of get people to just grow edible stuff, and then to either share it, you know, or she runs kind of pop-up shops and then people can come and take it, but they have to do something in exchange, whether it's tell a story, write a poem, do a dance, sing a song, or you know, do some work with them. Nothing's completely for free, but that's the whole kind of, you know, the idea of it. And and a bit like the Incredible, and there's Incredible Edible Todmerton. So there are a lot of fantastic projects around the place linking people up with food growing. And of course, if you can not just have the compost as a standalone thing, as a community compost, but if you can link it into other kind of things like the food growing, or like linking up with the health centres, which is something that I'm starting to get into. So I've designed a community allotment in the next town in Morton Hampstead here, and that's going really well because that's linked into the health centre. So they're doing what's called social and prescribing. So rather than going to see the doctor, you go to see the social prescriber, and they tell you that you need to get out and do some gardening, you know, or whatever it might be. And it's very, very successful. And that model is really growing well now. So I would talk to your local health centres as well, maybe in the around an allotment project in Bristol or wherever it might be, you know. Oh, I've just seen food and garden waste. You can talk, James. Going to biofuel. All right. Yeah. A lot of you know, that's another thing. Of course, there's foods going to anaerobic digestion. So there's a big anaerobic digester just outside Plymouth, and they could actually take all the food waste from Plymouth. All the food waste in Plymouth and Exeter is burnt at the moment, incinerated, and it could go for anaerobic digestion to create electricity. But they won't allow it because it interferes with the nuclear power plant supply, apparently. So I was told. Bit crazy. We'll get there one day. Any more thoughts, contributions from anyone?
Yeah, excuse me if Jeannie's laptop here is getting a bit overawed by all this video stuff. It does tend to make a bit of a hairy noise. But how can I personally get off the idea of digging over my vegetable patch, you know, at least once a year, and if not more often, to keep all those weeds away? What's you know, what's the sort of psychological move I need to make into no-dig gardening?
Okay, that's a very good question, Kat. I guess it's first of all, it's sort of changing your mindset from digging. I think it's partly this thing of when you say like every year, it's because there's the growing cycles there. We've got a calendar year. So where are you going to start on that calendar year to start growing things? So most people seem to think that now is the time to start, you know, in this part of spring, that this is the start of the cycle. I actually think it's diametrically opposite. I actually think that the best time to start your garden is September. If you sort of if you can try and have that sort of mental shift, because that's the time when most people are sort of harvest, you know, a lot of crops are sort of being harvested. It's the sort of most abundant harvest time, isn't it? And what you do when you've harvested something, what happens then? You know, you should always be thinking of what's the follow-on crop from what you've just taken out. So you should be ready to put something straight in there to follow it, you know. And it is a bit of a challenge to put enough stuff in for the whole of the winter. But that's why it's good to sort of grow those things that will grow through the winter. So right now I've got loads of garlic coming. I've got 2 whole beds of garlic coming up. I've still got a bed full of, well, we've been eating lots of it, but we've had a lot of leeks because Yuli's really keen on the leek growing. So she does the leeks, I do the garlic. We've got asparagus kale. We've got 4 beds of asparagus kale because it's one of my favorite plants. And we've been eating it all through the winter, just picking a leaf here and a leaf there off lots of different plants. And any time now it's going to start it's going to start shooting into sort of sprouts. So it'll be like sprouting broccoli. And that's a really, really great thing to do. So in other words, I haven't had to dig any. I've been mulching those, and you saw in some of the pictures earlier that they've been heavily mulched. And actually, I didn't answer a bit of Camille's question, I realized, because what I was going to say is, rather than getting in your big supply of municipal compost, find out what waste materials there are in your locality. So I got the thatcher, saw the thatcher working, and I said, "Can do you want to drop that old thatch off on the allotments?" Massive, great pile of thatching straw, which I hardly anyone in the allotments takes it. I've taken the whole bloody lot, I think, and I've put it on my paths. I make all the paths between my beds, because I've got these kind of raised beds. They're all thick with thatching straw and now wood chip on top, so that each path is becoming a kind of compost, like a windrow composting system. And then I've got a huge windrow that I've just split the other day. I mean, it was really tall, right up, and the whole half the width of the allotment, and it's had all the rough stuff in it, loads and loads of thatching straw, loads and loads of wood chip, and that's going to be split in half. And then I'm going to do the 3 sisters, which is, you know, sweet corn, climbing beans, and squashes growing on that. So you just basically, what you're doing when you're with a no dig is you're always thinking ahead of what's next. And if you really can't do it, just cover it up. So I've covered huge bits of the allotment actually with just piles of thatching straw. And if that's not broken down enough by the time I want to do things, well, I can just scrape it away from places. And that's actually where the beauty of sort of growing things in modules is, because you can then just pop the plants in around. So I can pop a row of whatever it is, or pull it back and cut a drill. Or if worse comes to worse, I can just rake a whole area of it off and just expose. I'll have the soil and I just give it maybe a little bit of a light hoe underneath to make a nice tilth for a seed bed. So you can still cultivate the top, you know, inch or so. It's just you don't want to dig in and invert it particularly, because you're breaking up all the roots of the plants. So your air, that wonderful structure that's there, allowing air and water to get in, is being broken up, and you're releasing carbon. You're releasing carbon dioxide when you dig, too. So particularly in Greece, it's really important to keep your soil covered and growing, because you've got a much more brittle landscape there, you know. And you'll store the water in the soil too. Don't forget that. That's the biggest thing, the biggest benefit of growing in Greece. And when I was on Tinos, the next island to you, you know, that's what we were doing there, mulching heavily, making as much compost as possible, and just keep adding it on the top, you know. I can send you a link to a really good guy. He's called Kerry Foriadis. He's on Paros, in your next island. He's doing a great project there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Well, it's 3:45. I've just realized. Are we going to wrap it up, or have people got, I mean, I'm happy to keep going, but have people got more questions or anything they want to say? And as I said, I'm very happy to, you know, if you think of things afterwards, do write to me. I'm very happy to, you know, within reason, help you out. I mean, I'm particularly keen to help out anyone who's doing community composting and setting up community gardens and that kind of thing. So, yeah.